Hello and welcome to another exciting, educative and informative edition of China Now, the show that focuses on bringing China closer to you. Let's begin today's show with China Current, where we'll have Kris explaining to us the Saudi-Iranian envoys meeting in China, which marked the very first formal meeting of senior diplomats from the two nations since 2016. Let's get started.
China Current is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to China Currents. I'm Kris. So Saudi Arabia and Iran surprised the world by resuming diplomatic relations after 7 years of tension. 7 years! Even lovebirds will grow estranged, let alone geopolitical rivals. Well, rivalry might be an understatement. Those guys were literally at each other's throats. Just a little background. In 2016, the Saudis severed their ties with the Iranians after the latter ransacked and set fire to the former's embassy to protest against the Sunni kingdom's execution of an anti-government Shiite cleric. They haven't talked since then, but they did all kinds of nasty things to each other through proxies, except fighting directly. In many ways, their struggle for power was like a mini Cold War in the Middle East, smaller in scale, but more complicated. I mean, come on, it's the Middle East. The very name of the region screams trouble. Religion, ideology, ethnicity, terrorism, governance, and geopolitics, they get all tangled together to create a freaking mess. It's like an interlocking puzzle nobody knows how to solve. Even the experts. The only thing they know, but you don't know, is how to pronounce those impossible names. Other than that, they just throw up their hands and say, oh, this shit is structural. Wow, brilliant insight. But now, all of a sudden, Saudi Arabia and Iran have decided not to be enemies anymore, but to be each other's Gorbachev, which is a much happier ending than the original Cold War. They're like, peace out, pal. I don't want to screw with you as long as you don't, The US and Israel were left out in the cold, blindsided by the unexpected reconciliation, wondering what happened. Did the sun rise in the west? No. Actually, the road to peace was paved from the east, China. The pact that brought Saudi Arabia and Iran back together was not bilateral, but a trilateral joint statement with China acting as the mediator. Hey bros, since I am here, do me a favor. Stop fighting. Fighting is bad for the economy. Saudi, I thought you said you want to diversify. And Iran, you still want to modernize? So promise me that you will do the right thing. And let me see your action. And the next thing you see is two mortal enemies shaking hands in Beijing. And the Chinese foreign minister literally brought their hands together, just like how Liu Bei turned two dueling warriors into sworn brothers in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And that meme has gone viral on the Chinese internet. People got so excited, cheering and celebrating. We did it! We restored world peace! Well, not entire world, but not far off. It's Middle East. The pit of chaos, where the US superpowers failed to achieve peace after decades of involvement. But it only took us weeks. So we did something the world's police couldn't do, so give us the Nobel Peace Prize. And that, I'm afraid, is not true. You can't be serious suggesting that China is able to do what the US isn't. Such hubris. I thought modest is a Chinese virtue. I could be wrong. But hey, you know what it means to be the most powerful country in the world? It means influence. People would have to listen to you. Maybe not out of respect for you, but certainly out of respect for your power. If the White House wills, it could bring to the negotiating table not just Saudis and Iranians, but Israelis and Palestinians, or even Russians and Ukrainians. Why not? Biden can just call up Putin and Zelensky, you guys free next Monday? Come and sign the peace treaty. I got it ready. So yes, the US is fully capable of putting a stop to almost all conflicts in the world single-handedly. What is extremely hard to achieve for those who are structurally bound to clash with one another, for the US, it's like a walk in the park. Easy breezy. Just let go, walk away, done. Well, to be fair, sometimes the hands-off approach just doesn't work.
You gotta hold even more tightly on the leash so those dogs know who's the boss here. And they'll stop barking when you tell them to shut up. Good boys. Hey guys, welcome to my house in East Asia. Meet Korea and Japan. They used to be enemies. Korea was seriously fucked by Japan, but now they're good. They got over it. You're good? You're good? See, they're good. Pax Americana. Peace under America's rule. So ladies and gentlemen, 3 cheers for Uncle Sam. Hip hip hooray! Who knows what miracles he can achieve so long as he puts his mind to it? But maybe, I'm saying maybe, he doesn't want universal peace after all. Why broker for peace when you can profit from war? There's an iron triangle among the Pentagon, defense contractors and politicians. It's called MICC, Military Industrial Congressional Complex, a hungry beast that feeds on wars, perpetual, endless wars. Wars that it doesn't have to win. Winning is good, but losing is better. Because the budget for next year is going to be even more bloated. Just stay put, boys. Don't pull out. We're coming from behind. With 2 vast oceans on both flanks, 800 military bases dotting the globe, and 40% of the world's military spending, the US has got to be the world's most secure country. There's no one to defend against, except maybe Canada. So, what to do with the security surplus? The extra guns, missiles, and fighter jets? Sell them to somebody else. You want security? Pick a weapon. Ours is the best in the world. No? You don't need them? You're secure enough? Really? Trust me, you're gonna need them. Or I'll make you need them. Do it. Well, sorry for the bad acting, but may I please remind you that US has been at peace for a grand total of 17 years in its 247 years of history. War is the modus operandi. The Department of Defense absolutely loves it. By the way, that's a misnomer. It was properly named as the Department of War for more than a century and a half until 1947 when he started to build a modern Pax Americana. Let's not talk about wars anymore, but rather peace on America's rule so we can have some order. My order. So this is important because wars make US so powerful, and power tastes so sweet that they won't hesitate to wage wars to defend power. You stop being so aggressive or I'll have to defend myself. Okay. Why am I talking about America? Sorry, just about a little digression. I just want to express my admiration for the genius idea of turning security into a major export. Now let's go back to China and the Middle East, okay? So the most surprising part about Saudi Arabia and Iran patching up their relationship is the involvement of China. Not as the third wheel, but as the third leg, providing crucial support to something so fragile that men handle with care, okay? Which is peace, obviously. So China is generally viewed correctly as an outsider to the Middle East. So we chose to stay out for good reasons. Because, well, no offense, Middle East, but your place is a madhouse. A attacks B, B attacks C, C attacks D, D attacks all of the above. So we're too scared to mess around. China is not the US. We're no match for them, okay? Unlike them, who are on a solemn mission to deliver the democracy brand of security to people's doorsteps, we Chinese people are never so altruistic. We're selfish. We're timid and shy. Everywhere we go, we just want to keep quiet, stay out of trouble, and make some money. 闷声发大财. Traditional Chinese wisdom, fairly simple. The business is all about seeking common ground while shelving differences. That's the art of the deal. Trump knows the best. When you hush hush, you get paid. I told you he's our guy. So China be like, I'm not here to judge. I'm in no position to judge. Go to Uncle Sam. He's the ultimate arbiter of good and bad. But if you come to me, don't tell me why you are right and he's wrong. Don't bother, because I have no interest, just like my development loans. So why don't you shut up and take my money? A little counterintuitive, let me explain. So China is not a rich country by per capita GDP, but it's become significantly richer than it used to be just a few decades ago. The big secret lies in state investment in infrastructure, or Keynesian economics with Chinese characteristics, if you will. So when China goes overseas, it speaks out of its own experience. Invest now, so you can have a fortune later. Take my loans, build yourself some roads, grow yourself some business, make yourself useful, all right? No judgment, just development. You guys cool with that? You don't want also okay, I go somewhere else. Like I said, China is no philanthropist. It lends out money now in hope of cashing in later. But the biggest problem with the majority of human beings, aka the developing world, is not that they don't have money. Of course they don't, but that's not the worst problem. The worst problem is they have no industry to make any stuff. So they got no choice but to put up with price scissors to sell their resources cheap and buy expensive manufactured goods. And as a manufacturing powerhouse, China can choose to rip them off. But that way, it won't sustain a healthy economic relationship in the long term. So China wants everybody to have some money, then they can afford more of our stuff. So we can make more money in the future. Therefore, we'll be better off ourselves if our partners' economy thrive. Such is the win-win situation China's been selling around the world. It's not China winning twice, but both partners winning repeatedly into the indefinite future. Anyone up for it? You bet! Who doesn't want a global public good China offers, which is development? Who doesn't want to develop? Who doesn't want better lives? Who doesn't want to ladder out the fucking pit of chaos? No one. Except perhaps extremist maniacs. Oh, by the way, those guys are not stupid. It's just their interests are not aligned with most people. You may guess why. Do it. So some people in the developed world think that shithole countries just fight for stupid reasons, that they tend to exaggerate them. They see Saudi Arabia and, to a greater extent, Iran as irrational fanatics who are bent on destroying each other. You ask them why? Oh, it's the religion that makes Sunnis and Shiites natural-born enemies. But in fact, those Muslims generally agree with each other. Same Allah, same Muhammad, alayhi salam, same Quran, just like Protestants and Catholics, same God, same Jesus, same Bible. Their difference? How many times you should pray each day? 3 or 5. Where to place your hands during prayers? Crossed in front or by the sides. Well, call me a kafir, but even the original split had more to do with politics than religion. So you see, politics always messed things up, which was exactly what happened between Saudi Arabia and Iran, who saw themselves as respective leaders of the two branches of Islam and both vied for regional dominance in the Middle East. But what had caused and enabled the power struggle in the first place? You need to go back 2 decades when the US crushed Saddam Hussein's Iraq, which was the third leader of the Arab world after Egypt and Syria, and a strategic counterweight to Iran, thereby creating a power vacuum that invited different forces, including state, governments, rebel militants, tribal warlords, and terrorist groups, to exploit the chaos in their Game of Thrones. So in a nutshell, the Americans screwed things up and opened a Pandora's box. In the past, China would have no choice but to retreat from conflict zones because it didn't, and it still doesn't have the capability to establish and maintain order overseas, let alone underwriting international security. That's the global public good / lucrative commodity made in US of A. It's their specialty. We'll never be able to manipulate the supply-demand of security like the US does, so as to keep everybody else in its orbit. Right? Korea and Japan? And Europe? Keep an eye on the French. That empire state of mind is just beyond us, okay? But the reason China is playing more active role is that more and more countries have welcomed Chinese presence in their economies because modern states need to deliver growth to its citizens in exchange for their consent to rule. Well, as I said, they're rational people. They've come to their senses and realized that their insatiable appetite for security is often artificially driven by he who mustn't be named, that they are pitted against one another fighting somebody else's war. So China can't undo the damages the Middle East has endured, but as a very old nation, it does bring a long-term civilizational perspective. So we all know the Arabs and Persians are not really into each other. But if you look at history, the Islamization of Persia and the Persianization of Islam, you'll see their fates were literally interwoven into each other's. They're like 2 disgruntled neighbors living in an old apartment. No matter how much grudge one holds towards the other, he knows perfectly well that it's impossible to evict his neighbor, who's entitled to the property just as much as he is. And he also finds the shabby building insufferable and wants to have an overhaul. So for better or for worse, you guys are going to share this place for the next 1,000 years. This is what we call the community of shared future for mankind. So why not just stop quarreling and talk to the project manager from the renovation company that's China? Hey guys, Let's start working. Well, thank you for watching our show. We'd love to see your thoughts and comments. Please contact us at the email address below. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thanks a lot, Kris. It's now time for Threshold, the segment of the show that talks about emerging technological innovations that have life-changing potential. Today's Threshold will be hosted by Hongda, who will bring us all we need to know about the Manta Ray Robot.
Hi, my name's Hongda, and this is Threshold in China, a segment that gives you a taste of the future before it actually happens. I'm going to talk about emerging technologies that have life-changing potential and assess their ability to influence our lives in the near future. I rate these emerging technologies on a 1 to 5 scale across 3 different dimensions: readiness, novelty, and potential impact, or ripples as I call it. If a technology scores a 3 or above in all 3 dimensions, it reaches the threshold of potentially having a substantial real-world influence in the near term. The star of today's story is a bionic Manta Ray robot. When it comes to bionic robots, you may have seen Boston Dynamics' famous robot dog online, which moves and reacts in a way that's more lifelike than ever. Recently, there's been a Cambrian explosion, if you will, of bionic robots under development, and I have little doubt that we will increasingly see them in our living and working environments in the near future. Walking robot dogs on the street may not be such a novelty these days anymore, but diving with your own robotic manta ray would certainly reward you with quite a few thousand additional TikTok followers. Recently, a team of researchers from Hangzhou's Westlake University, led by Professor Cui Wei-Cheng, has launched an experimental robotic manta ray, capable of moving freely and quietly like a real fish, and submerging to depth well out of reach of human divers, enabling scientists to explore the wonders of the deep sea. We all know that the ocean is one of the last remaining frontiers on Earth for exploring resources for sustainable human development, as well as mitigating the impacts of climate change, assuming we have the proper means to explore its depths in an efficient and economical way. Professor Cui was the designer of the Chinese manned submarine Jiaolong. Since humans already have existing manned and man-made submersibles that can dive to the farthest depth of the Mariana Trench, why do we still need to mimic marine life? Well, by nature's standards, existing submersibles are rather clumsy, as well as loud and unnatural. The constant noise of propellers and engines cause many problems for marine life in the ocean. By comparison, real fish smoothly glides, swims, or wiggles. After all, evolution is the world's ultimate engineer, and it has almost 4 billion years of experience under its resume. The fastest known marine species, the sailfish, can swim up to 70 miles per hour. By comparison, the fastest known man-made submarine, the Project 661 Anchor, has a top speed of only about 50 miles an hour. Moreover, fishes thrive in places in the deep ocean that most robots cannot efficiently reach. And there's an extra bonus that comes with fish-like movement. Most underwater sonar systems were designed to detect the sounds and vibrations of conventional propellers and engines. So underwater vessels that mimic the natural movements of marine life can blend into the background noise of the ocean with far greater ease, and thus are much harder to detect. This could provide a critical advantage in maritime defense applications. That said, there are thousands of species in the ocean, so why mimic the manta ray? Well, the manta ray has the biggest pectoral fins in proportion to its body. These fins enable the manta ray to glide long distances with minimal effort. This kind of motion gives it the advantage of better mobility, stability, and concealment. Scientists found that manta rays can travel long distances vertically. In other words, they're very good divers. By changing the angles of the fins relative to the body, they can dive or ascend easily in the water. And for this reason, in the last decade, scientists have been trying to replicate their movement with robotic copycats. However, earlier models produced more zombie-like fishes, with rigid bodies and uncanny stiffness that would scare even the ghostly manta rays themselves. So when creating his latest model, Professor Cui and his team chose to tackle 2 main design challenges: flexible materials for the pectoral fins, as well as modularity that enables the model to be expandable in function. The first challenge is self-evident. Past robotic models of manta rays were made of rigid material. Traditional motors and rigid structures could hardly mimic the natural deformation of the manta ray's pectoral fins. So the team started by redesigning the fins. A real manta ray's pectoral fins is made of cartilage, muscle, and skin. It's structured like a bird's wing, except that manta ray fins have flexible skin. Cui's team custom designed a set of flapping wing-like pectoral fins, made with 3 different materials that combine to mimic the wide pectoral fins of real manta rays. Carbon fiber is used as the underlying support structure, and lightweight polymers are 3D printed to form the shell and an inside layer so as to adjust to the buoyancy of the pectoral fins with a specific strength. The remaining 2 layers use liquid silicone compounds that have optimal elasticity for the use case. In sum, this is a process in which soft materials replace rigid materials, and 3D printing replaces forging, welding, and casting technologies. I have no doubt that this change will incrementally push the boundaries of robotic technology. But one other noteworthy achievement here caught my attention even more, which is its modular design. The past models of robot manta rays are like a flip phone of the old days. You can make phone calls or text with it, but not much else. You can't download apps on it and start surfing the web or social networks. You can't use it as a translator when you travel, or check out the latest viral videos. Those past models have just 1 or 2 fixed functions that can't be changed or expanded upon without redesigning and rebuilding a new model. On the other hand, Professor Cui's team made their robotic manta ray more like a smartphone. Like Android phones, they chose an open source design for both the software and the hardware. Inside the main body, there's a control unit, power unit, communications, cameras, and other sensors, all of which are easy to install and disassemble. You can assemble the robot fish according to the needs of the specific mission at hand, as well as the oceanic environment in which it operates, just like assembling Legos, if you will. Consequently, this robot's use cases are readily expandable. After the robot was assembled, Professor Cui's team tested its performance and yielded some promising initial results. Its flapping wing propulsion produced roughly 32% less drag relative to conventional propellers, while generating significantly greater lift for the robot. That means the flapping propulsion can be more energy efficient relative to conventional submarines traveling at the same speed, or travel far greater distances with the same amount of fuel. Compared to other existing man-made manta ray-like prototypes, Professor Cui's robot is by far the largest and the heaviest, while its swim speed comes in at about the middle of the pack. So while it's not the fastest prototype out there, its relatively large size and weight, along with its modularity, enables this model to carry an array of sensors for real-world applications, as opposed to just lab demonstrations. So this manta ray robot seems to be a promising tool for ocean exploration in the future. But how good is it according to the standards of the threshold rating? Well, let's come back to the 3 elements of the threshold rating system: readiness, novelty, and potential impact, or ripples as I'd like to refer to it. The readiness category refers to the maturity of a technology, from lab demonstration a score of 1 to mass production 5. The novelty score refers to how new the innovation is. 1 means small differentiation to existing tech. 5 means the innovation fulfills a brand new function. And finally, the ripple scale, as I'd like to call it. This is my opinion of a technology's potential for life-changing impacts and how widely it can be applied elsewhere. For more details of the rating system I'd like to use, you can pause the video here and have a look for yourself. So how does this manta ray robot stack up? Well, in the readiness category, I'd give this a 3. This prototype clearly goes beyond a demonstration of basic principles in the lab, but it's not yet ready for mass production at a reasonable cost. Nevertheless, this is a fully functional prototype. One of the downsides of the current prototype is that it's connected to a topside computer via a cable for control. Ideally, for real oceanic applications, some kind of wireless remote control mechanism needs to be incorporated into such a model. Better yet, as Professor Cui suggested, AI could be applied to the robot for control and navigation purposes. Next comes the novelty criteria. The flexible material design and the modularity of the system results in a clear functional difference compared to other manta ray-like robots, due to the size and weight being propelled in the water. So this goes well beyond small differentiation. However, it's not yet fulfilling a new function that can't be fulfilled by other technologies. After all, we have all kinds of submarines for underwater exploration, even if existing models are less efficient in certain ways. At the end of the day, the major component differences of this model gives it the potential to make undersea exploration far more efficient. So here again, it earns a solid 3. And finally, the ripples rating. The potential of this design to propel a bigger and heavier payload and to carry a variety of devices could make it a useful platform for a range of underwater use cases. Moreover, if material flexibility and modular design can be applied to the biomimicry of manta rays, similar techniques could also be applied to mimic the movements of other types of marine species from maritime vessels, and eventually other species outside of the ocean as well. This is a small but important step that opens up all sorts of new possibilities. So here I think a 4 rating seems to be reasonable. So at the end of the day, we have 2 3s and a 4. And that meets the criteria for real-world influence. At a fundamental level, what Professor Cui's team demonstrated here is our ability to make future robots mimic the physical movements of living beings in ever more nuanced and precise ways. If these techniques can be replicated, improved, and scaled up in cost-effective ways, it could enable a range of life-changing applications. So imagine a more lifelike prosthetics for disabled people who are missing limbs. Prosthetics which move and feel more like a real arm or leg. What about lifelike robotic cats and dogs for those with pet allergies or simply don't want the expense and hassle of a real pet? And of course, if you're a fan of dystopia and sci-fi like me, there are a whole host of military use cases for this type of biomimicry. For example, a reconnaissance drone can be designed that mimic the movements of the common swift, a migratory bird that can glide in the air for multiple months without landing. Or better yet, a human-like Terminator infiltration robot. So what new use cases can you think of for this innovation? We look forward to your feedback and thoughts.
Let's move on to the Thinkers Forum, where Comrade Kambale Musavuli will tell us all about the China-Congo relations. Let's find out if it is as exploitative as the West or if it is of mutual benefit.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've been given a task to speak a bit around the competition that's happening with the United States and China in DRC. It's very important because the connection between China and DRC has always been lost. Patrice Lumumba, one of our democratically elected leaders, was assassinated. Progressive forces came together to organize, to transform the Congo in the 60s, and China was actually supporting the Congolese. Do you recognize anyone in here? Right, this is happening in Tiananmen Square. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Tiananmen, is that correct? 700,000 people in 1964 came out in support of the Congolese people. As Mao was speaking, sharing about why we needed to side with the Congolese who were fighting against imperialism. But the history of China and Africa, in particular the Congo, doesn't start in 1964. China has always been with the African people in their struggle. Beyond now, the general discussion is always around infrastructure, but you were there when the Africans were fighting for independence, provided technical support, material support, intellectual support for us. And our struggle is ongoing up until today. But I wanted to kind of share where we are. Right in the heart of Africa, everything is there. And there is always a discovery. The cobalt, the coltan, the gold, the diamond, the oil. It's estimated that the oil reserve, the 27 oil blocks that the DRC government is selling, is estimated at about $160 billion. And they put it in auctions last year. There are 100 million people where they're saying in about 10 to 15 years, it's going to double. Right? The population of Congo is going to get to 200 million, which is about a quarter of Africa's population today. And with that population, half of the population is under the age of 18. So we have a vibrant youth fighting and organizing for a new Congo. But of course, we do have also a government. That's what I wanted to focus on around the competition to understand the complexity of what is actually unfolding. Now, Patrice Lumumba, democratically elected in 1960, wanted one thing for the DRC. It was very clear as he organized. He wanted the resources of the Congo to benefit the Congolese people. At the time, one of the most critical minerals was cobalt. There were 2 places where you could get it, USSR and DRC. So within weeks of him becoming Prime Minister of the DRC, he was deposed. Within months, he was assassinated, and it created a global outcry. But his ideas continue up until today, where the people of the Congo are still striving for change. But then in 1997, right at the end of the First Congo War, the leader who took power through an invasion backed by the United States and the United Kingdom, the leader was Laurent Désiré Kabila. You know of him for people on the left from Che Guevara's diary in the DRC. He speaks of him. When Che Guevara came in the Congo in 1965, he connected with the movement fighting for the liberation of the Congo at the time, led by Laurent Désiré Kabila. And of course, the mission was not successful. No, Che Guevara left. He said something very important at the time. He said that if the leaders of the Congo are people such as Laurent Désiré Kabila, Congo will be in bondage for centuries to come. Right? And guess who the United States chose? Laurent Désiré Kabila. But there is something also a bit contradictory about his position. On one hand, he was backed by the United States, but on the other hand, because of also his movement, he was close to the left. So his first visit in the East here in Asia was he took a trip to China from the 14th of December to the 20th of December. 1997. Not that China did not have relations with the DRC under Mobutu, who was the president before, but this was an opening of the current engagement of China in DRC. His 1997 visits coming to China. A few years later, he was assassinated, and then his son was took power in 2001. Were actually from the left. They're actually communists, underground communists within the government. For about 4 years, working with him, pushed him to actually come to China. So in his visits in 2005, meeting with the leaders here in China, it was agreed that it was time for China to support the DRC. The project that they came together with was, how do we develop the infrastructure of DRC? The model that they chose was, we are going to build your infrastructure in exchange of mineral resources. And the agreement was signed on the 22nd of April 2008. It was a $9 billion deal. What's the model? $6 billion for infrastructure, build the roads, hospitals, and things that the country needs in terms of infrastructure. $3 billion, right, the remaining billion, was a joint project between the DRC government and China, China Railway Group Limited, Sino Hydro Corporation, where they will go into the exploitation of our resources, of the proceeds of the sale of the minerals, will pay for the $6 billion, right? So it's a 25 years project. Now, what does that mean? It means that at the end of the project, Congo had zero debt. Right? And this is a model that China had used already in Angola and in Brazil. You will be surprised what happened in 2009. Anybody remember 2009? I remember 2009. And I hope I will remind you what happened in 2009 if we play a short video of a famous person in 2009 in DRC.
I'm at Unikin. Mrs. Clinton. We've all heard about the Chinese contracts in this country. Their interferences from the World Bank against this contract. What does Mr. Clinton think through the mouth of Mrs. Clinton? And what does Mr. Mutombo think on this situation? Thank you very much.
Wait, you want me to tell you what my husband thinks? My husband is not the Secretary of State. I am. So you ask my opinion, I will tell you my opinion. I'm not going to be channeling my husband.
So some people in the West have seen this video, right? And as you're watching, you're probably getting very angry at the young Congolese who ask about her husband. My lot was lost in translation. That's not what the student asked. This was not the toughest question, by the way. The toughest question was a young woman who came in front, picked up the mic, and she told Hillary Clinton, if tomorrow I'm the Prime Minister of the Congo, will you assassinate me? Wow. Right? So there is actually a New York Times article that kind of mentioned that question, right? They were very, very tough questions. These students, and many young students, really understood what China was doing in 2008 after the Sendai Accord. And there was an influence, right? In the context of the Congo in 2009, Congo had $14 billion of debt from the World Bank. Most of this debt are odious debt, going all the way back to the Belgian colonial time, where we as an independent country had to repay. So the World Bank and the IMF told the Congolese government, if you want us to forgive your odious debt, you need to renegotiate the Chinese contract. That was already the pressure after April of 2008, and it was ongoing. Assistant Secretary of African Affairs, Carson, flew before her to the DRC in 2008, end of 2008. As he flew, in his press conference, he spoke again about the Chinese contract, that it needed to be renegotiated. It did not happen. Then she came, and the student asked, we see the interference of the World Bank and IMF around the Chinese contract, and asked her, what do you think? The translator said, what does your husband think? That's not what the student said. But regardless of the context, she never answered the most important question asked by a student in Kinshasa about the US interference, and that question was never answered. And what happened when she left Kinshasa? The $9 billion deal became $6 billion. She was there for 2 weeks. By the time she flew out, renegotiation started. The Chinese ambassador at the time, interviewed by the Financial Times, said, the World Bank and IMF, I'm not paraphrasing, the World Bank and IMF are blackmailing the Congolese government. Direct quote from the Financial Times. So in the end, the project was not what it was originally intended. So fast forward to 2000, as you look in the press today, looking into the Chinese contract, there are a lot of discussions around the DRC has to renegotiate the Chinese contract. When COVID started, President Xi in January had a call with President Tshisekedi. And the discussion was, one, forgiving the debts. I think it was about $58 million was forgiven from some of the loans that China provided to DRC as alleviation for COVID during the time. Xi calling was to make sure that the program is still ongoing. And then, surprisingly, President Felix Tshisekedi, who's the current president, around April, due to the pressure of the United States, called for another renegotiation of Chinese contract. So I'll share with you the structure of the loan, and I'll share with you how now it's actually terrible for the Congolese what is happening. But if it's not $3 billion, what is it that they're going to renegotiate, right? So what is it, if I have to look at it from a technical perspective, what is it that Congo is getting? In the original $9 billion, 68% was China and 32% was the DRC. It is low, right? You can say maybe 49 to 50 or 51 and so on. But no one in DRC today provided DRC with 32% in a stake in the project. Not only that, Glencore, which is a Swiss company operating at the New York Stock Exchange, which was just found last year, right, liable for corruption in DRC for bribing Congolese politicians, and they had to pay, I think, over $200 million in fine from the US Department of Justice. Do you know what Congo get from that mine? Anyone can guess? 1%, 2%? Oh, she guessed correct. Glencore, which has two mines, Mutanda Mining and Katanga Mining, in that stake, right? What is Glencore? Glencore gets the cobalt in DRC. And the number one buyer of cobalt is Tesla. So every Tesla that you see in the world today has the cobalt that come from Mutanda Mining and Katanga Mining, which is in DRC, right? That stake, Congo gets zero. But there's another example of a Chinese company that's actually doing things right. I need to actually get the name of the company itself. Somides is a non-ferrous metal mining in the DRC. The DRC get 49% and China gets 51%. No one gives Congo 49%. Right? But in the press, as you hear, you will not know all these type of details in terms of development. But why is there a switch with Felix from Kabila? Right? There is a change of government, there is a new president. Felix Tshisekedi, arguably, depending on who you read, was not elected by the Congolese people. The first government to recognize the election of 2018 was the United States. Is literally in the hand of the United States. And there are some contradictions in government. So as his first travel internationally was actually Washington, D.C. He traveled to the US in April of 2019, went to the World Bank, went to the IMF, met some mining companies. So he had guarantees that the West will support him. And the US, whispering in his ears, you need to renegotiate the Chinese contract and give us control of cobalt because cobalt is essential for the current technological advance around the world. And the US has been successful because this December, they were able to sign an agreement between the Congo and Zambia, where they signed a memorandum of understanding where Congo's cobalt today is directly funneled to the United States. That brings into question what will happen to China-Congo, which has the largest copper and cobalt reserve in the DRC. So this is why the CEO of China-Congo has been going to the DRC often to try to understand what is actually unfolding. What I wanted to share in my presentation is to understand Congo's role in in modern day technology, how games are played, depending on who is the leader, what is actually in writing and how it's actually benefiting people. But there are a lot of misinformation around what China is doing in the DRC, particularly the mining, because not enough researchers are providing information that presents the facts. I think I will end there, and I hope in our exchange and discussions, we'll be able to get more information. Know that the people of the Congo, everything I share, the number one concern right now is to have a peaceful country where they control their land and resources. They understand the contradictions of what's happening at the government level, and they are hoping in their struggle, they can also connect with ordinary people around the world so that we decide how we use the profit for our land to build our roads, our hospitals, our schools, and be a better human being and contributing to the humanity. Thank you.
This brings us to the end of today's edition of China Now. I hope you enjoyed the show today as always. And if you have any feedback or suggestions for us in the coming episodes of the show, please do not hesitate to reach out to us through the email provided below. Thank you so much for watching today's edition and see you same time next week.